Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
Hello, welcome to Plead the First, a show where we have a dialogue on current events. This is Preston.
And this is Izan.
All right, on to the topic of the day. So today we will be talking about the tariffs, the tariff war, the trade war between the U.S.
and China. That's right. And today we actually have some examples of how the tariffs will affect the average U.S. citizen. So here we have a banana and an orange and a peanut butter jelly sandwich. How much more would it cost for the average American citizen to just buy these items?
So we did a little research, right? An average peanut butter jelly sandwich. I know this is crazy, right? Mm-hmm. So we're doing calculations on how expensive a peanut butter jelly sandwich costs. And it says that average cost is about 40 cents. Very cheap. You know, you can make one in the morning, have it for breakfast. You got protein, you got, you know, the carbs. I think it's
really a full breakfast.
Yeah, and then if it's a 10% increase, that's 4 cents every day, you know, extra. You know, that can really add up.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of these items are cheap to begin with, but it really adds up at 10%, right? So $14 more on a peanut butter jelly sandwich, you know, the most basic
per year
item. Now we're okay. We're pretty well off, but
$14 for a peanut butter jelly sandwich. I mean, like per year. If that's all I'm paying more for a peanut butter jelly sandwich, that's not much. But on the other hand, right, on the receiving end of these tariffs, right, there's China, right. So how much is the increase for most of these goods in China?
It's going to be about 25% as well. Like we'll be exporting gas, natural gas to China, and copper or concentrate. Where U.S. is very rich in natural resources, and when we export those things out, it'll be 25% more expensive.
Yeah, exactly. So what I'm hearing here is that China is going to be hit a lot harder with these tariffs than we are. Right, because while we spend about roughly 10% more on these products, and mostly these on the cheaper side, China is actually going to be spending 25% more for U.S.-made products.
Actually, I would have to disagree with you on that. See, on face value, we got this war going where we're like, okay, if we had to buy stuff from China, now it's going to cost more, and Chinese people buying stuff from us, it's cost more. But historically, if you look at some classic examples, okay? For example, in 2001, U.S. slapped a very harsh tariff on Chinese honey. Now that's kind of weird, right? Why honey specifically? I'm not quite sure, but the U.S. taxed honey a lot, and it really discouraged Chinese farmers from to sell to America for a while. And then something magical happened. What happened was China started selling to India, right? China started selling to India, and what the Indians would do, or India would do, was they would get the honey and they would extract the Chinese flower pollen and then put in Indian flower pollen. Now, why would they do that? Is so that like Indians, they import so much honey that they cannot consume themselves, and they actually sell it back to America. Now, when the America customs, they inspect the products. They look at it, they take a sample of the honey. It's like, it's Indian flower powder, pollen. No way it's made in China, right?
Yeah.
But then they look at the numbers. No way India can produce that much honey.
Of course.
So they're a little puzzled. In fact, I was reading this one article on New York Times. It was just talking about that. And, it's really tough, with there's so many different pathways, right? When you set a tariff on a country, what that does is it encourages that country to go to another country and just work deals out. So there's like basically a third party, it's like a middleman.
Yeah.
It encourages a country to get a middleman to sell products once again.
So what you're saying is that the more that the U.S. puts tariffs and restrictions on trade, the more people will try to get around them. And you're saying that they do succeed.
I personally do believe that's the case. And as a consumer, the tariffs, at the end of the day, it's the consumers that's really taking the blow here.
That is true.
The Trump administration is saying it would reduce reduce the debt. There's like a trade deficit, but that's not how open market operations work. Trade occurs when both parties mutually agree that the trade is beneficial. And if the price of a product goes up, what's going to happen is there's less beneficial trade happening overall. As consumers, our buying power basically decreases. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think that when you take it from a purely economic perspective, it would definitely be better for both players to sort of agree on how much trade there is and just allow free trade to take over the market.
Yeah.
But as we've seen, this hasn't been happening in the relationship between China and the U.S. In fact, China has historically been involved in a lot of protectionist trade, and so what the Trump administration is doing here, as far as I can interpret it, right, is that they're saying that we're going to play the same game, right? That we can't play by China's rules, right? If we're going to have free trade, we're going to have free trade. But if China, right, is going to be basically taking advantage of U.S. trade, right? If they're going to be doing that, then we also have to start playing that same game, right? But I definitely do think that overall, right, that a free market trade between U.S. and China would be beneficial. But as far as I can see, China is not fully interested in that.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the volume. We are a big importer and not a very big exporter, and China just has the volume advantage on us.
But one of the things that China is doing right now, right, is that they're doing a lot of intellectual property stealing.
Oh, that's very true.
Yes,
very true.
And that's been bolstering their trade very unfairly. And as far as I can see, right, China hasn't been cracking down on people who have been stealing intellectual property. They're not really taking an honest effort at protecting the trade and making sure that it is a free and fair market. And so I think that personally, that as long as China is not taking the steps to ensure honest and free trade, then the tariffs are a good way, or one of the ways, right, that we can ensure that we're playing by the same rules in the same game.
That's a very interesting point. This is kind of weird because when we ensue these tariffs, right, we're punishing the whole entire market. I think that it'll be more effective to just target those individual companies that's just ripping off of U.S. companies that have one of the things we talk about is U.S. really has entrepreneurship that China lacks. Historically, China really discouraged that. Recently, it got better. But if we want to attack that issue, we got to go after these individual companies and not punish the whole market, right?
Yeah, and there's also the interesting thing where we're putting a lot of tariffs on steel, right, on Chinese steel that's coming into the U.S. But at the same time, are American steel companies really doing that well? And should we be protecting them?
That's very true too. The Rust Belt.
Protecting them?
That's one thing, right? I feel like the U.S. the government, it's not their job to ensure the success of every single industry. Certain industries naturally just die off as our society advances. I'm not saying steel is dying off, but sometimes it's just more effective to import from other places.
Yeah, I think that one of the things though is that we do need to be cognizant of the people that we are affecting when we do have protectionist trade. Obviously, we don't want people in America to be going unemployed because we didn't protect the steel industry.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Absolutely. But the thing here is that we can't be protecting an industry that is having bad practices. And what a bad practice would be just selling steel that is less, strong than Chinese steel, right?
Right. That would be a reasonable thing
right.
to do.
If American exceptionalism is truly there, right, we should be able to stand on our own merits. We should be able to sell our steel as American steel, and people should be able to trust it instead of having to protect our industry, instead of having to put a bunch of taxes on some foreign company, right? If we really believe in our steel, we should be able to show it through the free market. China has been ramping up the taxes on the U.S. too, because they do at least from their standpoint, these tariffs are actually doing something. So that could be interpreted as these tariffs actually doing their job, because China should be sort of scared that they're going to be losing their trade with the U.S. after we have this playing field, right, where we say we're not going to be disrespected, right, we're not going to be disrespected by this unbalanced trade, maybe then we can reach a deal, right? And this might be what the Trump administration is trying to do. I'm not sure. I can't say exactly what the Trump administration is trying to do with this, but that feels like where the Trump administration is trying to go with this.
Right.
What would you say about that?
I feel like what you said is about right. But I feel like there's a lot more gears in play or things in play. For example,
so what would your solution to this problem be? Like if you were to give a solution that maybe you don't know if it's going to work, but you would try it.
I'm going to be honest with you. Trade wars, I'm not for it. There's always something around. Free market always wins. But like you brought up, there's the intellectual property question. That's a tough cookie. Let me tell you, that's a tough cookie.
Yeah.
And baseline, I hope the result is that the Chinese people might be more tolerant to those rip-off brands or companies that steal intellectual property.
But what we're really trying to do, what we're really trying to get to, right, is the Chinese government going to make some policy changes, right, in the way that it interacts with the U.S. economy, right? Because as of now, they're not playing fair. We're not on a fair playing field, right? And we need to put pressure on the Chinese government somehow to make these changes. So what would your solution to that be?
Put pressure on... I don't think it's going to work.
You don't think it's going to work?
Yeah, China is... well, we're always going to be enemies. If one day, somehow we like China, I feel like there's something off. When I was visiting my family in China, they all hate Trump. And this is what they said. What my grandfather said is it's normal for a country to hate another country's president. That should be the norm. That means that country's president is pushing pressure, elsewhere. If the people of China like Trump, that's a big issue. That means Trump is too lenient.
Yeah.
Right? At the end of the day, China, they're really sneaky, right? If they're not doing trade war, they can always manipulate their currency. Chinese government saying that actually the U.S. government is being the bully here and imposing all these tariffs. Now that's kind of funny, because where do you draw the line, right? Having power, we have control.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we're always bullying, right?
Yeah.
There's always two perspectives.
Yes.
When we, as U.S. people, when we interfere with other countries' business, and sometimes we perceive it as it's for the good, for their own good.
Yeah.
But other countries gonna have a different perspective. They're gonna think it's bullying. Like when we try to promote freedom, when we promote liberty, when we promote elected officials, people can see, why are they imposing Western ideals on us? And I think that's what's happening here.
But you would say that the U.S. has misstepped sometimes.
Oh, definitely. For sure. Yeah. I don't think all U.S. policies and ideals work with all civilization.
Right.
But just to say, we're not gonna interfere, or we're not gonna, we're gonna give up on trade just because we're gonna perceive other people saying we are the bully is kind of I don't think that's ideal either.
So we're running out of time here, but I would just like to get your opinion one last time. So knowing that tariffs might be a bad idea, what would your policy be to stop, the imbalance of Chinese and U.S. trade?
I think the government should definitely invest more on education. And I think that's the root of the thing, right? American dream is driven by entrepreneurship. All these new companies, we need to bring back Google, Amazon, all these great companies, Microsoft, all started in the U.S. And those companies is what defines America, American economy, Ford, we revolutionized car making.
Yeah, the
we
innovation,
just we need more of that innovation. Instead of imposing taxes and tariffs on these imports, the government should encourage education, encourage entrepreneurship, making just starting business easier and getting more accessible resources for people who are willing to start something.
So what you're basically saying is that instead of taking the my way or the highway sort of approach and saying, China, you have to play on the same field as us, we should bolster our own economy from within and then be the role model for the rest of the countries in the globe.
That's the way to go.
Thank you for watching this episode of Plead the First. We want to know what you're thinking. Please comment down below whether you think the US and China tariffs are good or bad or whatever your opinion you have on them. If you like this episode, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.